Welcome to Reddit Saga. If you're a fan of heartfelt, real-life stories, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss out. Thanks for being here. Let's dive into today's story.
The room smelled faintly of roast beef and disappointment. I sat at the dinner table, my fork pushing peas around my plate, while my father cleared his throat for the third time, a habit he had whenever he was building up to something unpleasant. My mother fidgeted with her napkin, and my brother, golden child, professional screw-up, leaned back in his chair like he had no worries in the world. I already knew something was wrong. I just didn't expect the level of audacity they were about to throw at me. Dad put his fork down with a loud clatter, folded his hands together, and stared at me like I was a defendant on trial. "We need to talk," he said, voice low and grave, as if someone had died. I looked up slowly. "About what?" He exhaled through his nose like a bull ready to charge. "Your brother's in trouble." Of course he is, I thought. My brother was always in trouble. He was the kind of person who thought minimum payments on credit cards were optional, the kind who leased cars he couldn't afford and bragged about bottle service at clubs he shouldn't even be entering. He was a walking cautionary tale with good hair. Dad continued. "He's gotten into some debt. Credit cards. About $15,000. I set my fork down carefully. And, Mom chimed in, her voice high and brittle. "We thought you could help him out. Just this once. Just this once." Like I hadn't already floated him loans that were never repaid, covered his portion of rent in college, or bought him groceries when he blew his paycheck on concert tickets. Just this once. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. "No." The word was small, but it detonated in the room like a bomb. Mom's face crumpled. "But you have the money," she whispered. Dad's hand slammed down on the table, rattling the silverware. "Family helps family," he barked. "I have the money because I work hard. Because I save. Because I don't spend it on stupid things," I said, my voice calm, though my heart was thudding against my ribs. "You owe us," Dad roared, pushing up from his chair so hard it scraped backward across the tile. "We raised you, we fed you, we paid for your college." I stood too, feeling my face burn. "I worked through college. I had scholarships. You paid for him." Silence. Dense, suffocating silence. My brother shifted in his seat, looking everywhere but at me. Dad's face twisted into something feral. "You ungrateful little." And then he lunged. It happened so fast I barely had time to move. His hand shot out like he was going to grab me by the shirt or shove me, I don't know which. Instinctively, I stepped back, knocking over my chair with a loud crash. My mother shrieked and my brother finally looked up, wide-eyed but motionless. I stared at my father like he was a stranger. In that moment, I realized he wasn't lunging at me because I was selfish or cruel. He was lunging because he couldn't control me. Not anymore. I had stepped outside the role they had carefully crafted for me, the role of fixer, of peacemaker, of financial safety net, and they didn't know what to do with me now. He stood there panting, fists clenched at his sides, as if weighing whether he could salvage the performance. Maybe he realized how he looked, an aging man attacking his grown child over money that wasn't even mine to begin with. I righted my chair slowly and set it back at the table. My hands were steady now. "I'm leaving," I said. "You walk out that door, you're not welcome back." Dad spat. I almost laughed. The threat was supposed to hurt. It was supposed to make me apologize, to sit back down and open my wallet and pretend that love meant emptying myself for people who only took. Instead, I picked up my jacket, slung it over my arm, and said, "Good." I walked out into the night, the air sharp and cold against my skin. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying anyone else's mistakes on my back. The stars above seemed closer somehow, like they were witnesses to my small rebellion. I didn't look back. Not once. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw them through the front window, Dad pacing, Mom crying, my brother sulking. The same dance, the same guilt, the same chaos. But this time, I wasn't on the floor dancing with them. I was free. And maybe, just maybe, it was time they started cleaning up their own messes. I didn't hear from them for 3 days after I walked out. 3 whole days of blessed silence. Then the text messages started. First from Mom. "We're family. Family helps each other." Then from Dad. "You owe your brother this. After everything we've done for you." Even my brother chimed in, a casual, "Don't be a jerk. It's just money." It was almost funny, if it hadn't been so predictable. The language they used hadn't changed. It was soaked in obligation, saturated with the assumption that I would fall back into line if they just pressed the right guilt buttons. For years it had worked. For years I believed that love meant sacrifice without question. As a kid, I watched my parents bail my brother out of trouble after trouble, speeding tickets, missed rent, bad grades. When I asked for help with my college applications, I was told to figure it out on my own because my brother needed their attention more. When he needed a new car, they co-signed without hesitation. When I needed braces, I got a payment plan. I learned early, he was the investment, I was the insurance policy. It didn't matter how careful I was, how responsible. My success wasn't celebrated, it was expected. And my reward was always the same, another burden. Another check to write. Another fire to put out that wasn't mine to begin with. Family means sacrifice, Mom would say, wiping away fake tears whenever she needed me to open my wallet. Dad would grunt in agreement, arms crossed, daring me to challenge the family narrative. But sacrifice without respect isn't love. It's exploitation dressed up in pretty words. Still, when I moved out on my own, I tried to stay connected. I attended birthdays, holidays, the endless string of family emergencies that somehow always ended with me footing part of the bill. I told myself it was normal. That everyone's family was a little messy. It wasn't until I started talking to friends that I realized my normal wasn't healthy. Most of them had families that wanted to see them thrive, not just survive to serve others. When I mentioned the time my parents had guilt-tripped me into paying off my brother's overdue tuition, one friend actually choked on her coffee. That's when the first real crack appeared in the foundation of my loyalty. But cracks don't bring down a house. They just let the rot in. The real collapse came the day I sat across from my parents and realized they didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a resource. As an account they could draw from, emotionally and financially. I didn't respond to their texts. I didn't answer the dozen missed calls. I let the phone vibrate itself into silence. On the fourth day, they showed up at my apartment. I heard the banging on the door before I even made it down the hall. When I opened it, Dad pushed inside first, blustering and red-faced. Mom trailed behind him, sniffling dramatically. My brother leaned against the doorframe outside, arms crossed, a smug look on his face like he already knew how this was going to end. Dad didn't waste time. "You need to apologize," he said. "For what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "For abandoning your family," he barked. "For being selfish. For thinking you're better than us." I stared at him. "I didn't abandon anyone. I'm just not willing to drown with you," Mom wailed then, throwing herself onto my couch like a grieving widow. "We did everything for you," she sobbed. "And this is how you repay us?" I wanted to feel something, pity, sadness, guilt. Instead, I felt a clarity I hadn't known was possible. I saw them for who they were, manipulators desperate to maintain control over the one person who had always done what was asked. "You raised me," I said evenly. "That was your responsibility as parents. It wasn't a transaction. You don't get to hold it over my head for the rest of my life." Dad's face darkened. "You wouldn't even be here if it weren't for us." "I know," I said quietly. "And I'm grateful for the life you gave me. But gratitude doesn't mean surrender. It doesn't mean I have to bankroll my brother's mistakes while he laughs behind my back." "You think you're better than us," Dad sneered. I met his glare without flinching. "No. I just refuse to let your definition of family destroy my future." Outside, my brother scoffed loudly. "You're so dramatic." I ignored him. He wasn't the point. He was the symptom, not the disease. Dad stepped closer, his hands balling into fists. For a second, I wondered if he'd try to lunge again. I wondered if he realized that this time, I wouldn't just step back. I would fight for myself. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. Instead, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Mom hesitated a moment longer, looking at me with wide, teary eyes, searching for the child who used to cave under that gaze. But I wasn't that child anymore. She followed him out without another word. My brother flipped me off before sauntering after them. I locked the door behind them. This time, it wasn't just the lock clicking into place, it was the final nail in the coffin of the version of me they had always counted on. I sat down on the couch, letting the silence settle over me like a warm blanket. They said family meant sacrifice. I said not blindly. And for the first time, I truly meant it. After that day, the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was charged. I could feel it humming around me like a warning. I knew they weren't done. They wouldn't let go that easily. My refusal to bend wasn't just an inconvenience to them. It was a threat to the entire system they built around me. I was the one stable pillar in a house of cards, and they had just realized I could walk away any time I wanted. It started small. My bank notified me about an attempted login from an unknown device. I brushed it off at first, maybe it was just a glitch. But then came the mysterious calls about overdue payments on a card I didn't own, strange letters about debts I supposedly co-signed for. That's when I realized, they weren't just angry, They were desperate. Desperation makes people sloppy. I gathered every document I had: bank statements, credit reports, emails, text messages. I sat at my kitchen table for hours, sorting through it all like a detective at a crime scene. Every piece of paper told a story. The loans they had quietly put my name on, the bills they had rerouted to old addresses, the accounts opened using information they shouldn't have had. It was all there, in black and white. Betrayal, notarized. A few years ago, I would have cried. I would have curled up in bed, sick with grief, wondering how my own family could do this to me. But not now. Not anymore. Now I was angry. And more importantly, I was clear. They had pushed me into a corner, thinking I'd stay there, small and scared and compliant. What they didn't realize was that when you push someone hard enough, you don't just trap them, you force them to find another way out. I wasn't going to stay in the corner. I was going to build a door. First, I froze every account I had. I closed credit cards, opened new ones under completely new banks, and changed my direct deposit information at work. I moved my savings into a high-security credit union they didn't even know existed. I pulled my credit reports and flagged all fraudulent activity, disputing every false account until my record was clean. Then I contacted a lawyer. Sitting across from her in her sleek downtown office, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. "You have a strong case," she said after reviewing the documents. "Financial abuse, identity theft, coercion. It's all here." I nodded, my throat tight. "We can file a cease and desist to block them from contacting you," she continued. "And we can report the fraud to the authorities if you want to press charges." Part of me balked at that. Press charges? Against my own parents? It sounded monstrous. But then I thought about every hour I had worked overtime to pay debts that weren't mine. Every dream I had shelved because they needed something first. Every time I had been made to feel like love was a ledger, and I was permanently in the red. They had made their choices. I was just finally making mine. "I want to do it," I said. She smiled, not unkindly. "Good. Let's get to work." Over the next few weeks, I became meticulous. I documented everything. Every call, every text, every unwanted attempt at contact. I stopped answering unknown numbers. I let my lawyer handle all communications. I protected myself like my future depended on it, because it did. The backlash was immediate. Mom left voicemails that swung wildly between tearful apologies and furious accusations. Dad sent letters filled with veiled threats and biblical references about disobedient children. My brother posted cryptic messages online about betrayal and loyalty, fishing for sympathy from friends and relatives. But I didn't respond. Not once. Every time they tried to corner me, I added another brick to my door. Every guilt trip, every tantrum, every smear campaign, they were all just more materials to build my exit. Eventually, my lawyer sent them an official notice. Any further harassment would result in restraining orders and criminal charges. The noise died down after that. Not because they understood, but because they finally realized I wasn't bluffing. In the quiet that followed, I started to rebuild my life. I took a second job, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I wanted to fill my time with something that was mine, something that couldn't be taken or manipulated. I enrolled in night classes for a certification I'd always dreamed of getting but never had the time for. I found friends who didn't just want things from me, who didn't weigh my worth in dollars and favors. I started volunteering at a local shelter, helping people who truly needed a hand up, not a handout taken for granted. For the first time in my life, my energy went toward building, not repairing. Toward growth, not survival. One night, a few months later, I got an email. It was from my brother. Subject: family. Message: "You really think you're better than us? You'll regret this when you're alone." I stared at it for a long moment, then clicked. Block. Alone? Maybe. But there are worse things than being alone. Like being surrounded by people who only love you when you're useful. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside my window. It was late. The air was cool. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like the world was closing in on me. It felt wide open. I thought about all the times I had been told that sacrifice was love. That pain was loyalty. That endurance was virtue. They were wrong. Sacrifice without choice is not love. Pain demanded is not loyalty. Endurance expected is not virtue. It's slavery wrapped in prettier words. They had pushed me into a corner. And in that corner, I had found my strength. I had built a door. And I had walked through it, into a life that was finally mine. A few weeks later, I got a certified letter confirming that all fraudulent accounts had been shut down and my credit was fully restored. I stood in my living room holding that letter like it was a trophy. It wasn't just paperwork. It was proof. Proof that I could protect myself. That I could say no. That I could rebuild from nothing. I celebrated by buying myself a small, silly gift, a keychain shaped like a tiny golden door. It made me laugh every time I looked at it, a private joke between me and the universe. Some doors you find. Some doors you build with your own hands. And when you do, no one gets to shut you inside a corner again. Not ever. The first real sign that things were changing came about 6 months after the cease and desist letters were sent. I was sitting at my favorite coffee shop, reviewing materials for a new certification exam, when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Out of curiosity, I glanced at it, and froze. The headline was simple. Local family sued over outstanding debts, property seized. I clicked on the article, my heart pounding harder than I wanted to admit. There it was, in plain text, my parents' names. My brothers too. They had defaulted on multiple credit lines. Their house was on the verge of foreclosure. The lawsuit outlined debts so large they almost didn't seem real. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't triumph. It was a strange, hollow ache. Like watching a slow-motion crash you had tried for years to prevent, only to realize you were never the driver, you were just one more passenger they planned to sacrifice for spare parts. I set the phone down, staring out the window as the city moved on without noticing the small catastrophe unfolding just a few miles away. I had expected to feel free when I cut ties. I hadn't expected to feel weightless. For so long, I had carried the burden of keeping everyone afloat. Now, with that weight finally dropped, I wasn't sinking anymore. I was learning how to swim. I moved into a new apartment that summer, a small but sunny one-bedroom across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I picked out every piece of furniture myself, right down to the thrifted lamp shaped like a ship's wheel that made me smile every time I turned it on. There was no one criticizing my choices, no one siphoning my paycheck before I even had a chance to use it. Every paycheck now felt like a small rebellion, a statement, this is mine. I got promoted at work a few months later, something that might not have happened if I had still been running around putting out fires for everyone else. I poured myself into my career, into building a life that was stable, whole, and self-made. And for the first time, I started dreaming again. Big dreams. A trip to Europe. A master's degree. Starting my own business one day. They had broken the bank, literally and figuratively. They had destroyed the foundation they stood on because they thought it would never crack. Because they thought I would always be there, patching up the leaks, absorbing the costs. But I had broken free. One afternoon, almost a year after that chaotic dinner table confrontation, I ran into my brother at a grocery store. It was accidental. I turned the corner of an aisle and there he was, older but not wiser, a few pounds heavier, his face drawn tight like life had stopped handing him easy wins. He froze when he saw me. For a split second, I thought he might say something. Apologize, maybe? Reach out. Instead, he scoffed, muttered something under his breath, and pushed his cart past me without another glance. I watched him go, feeling nothing but a distant sadness. Not regret. Not anger. Just a deep, quiet mourning for the relationship we never had, the brother I had hoped he might one day become. But you can't mourn what never existed. I finished my shopping without another thought of him. Later that night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker to life one by one. I thought about the family dinners, the manipulated conversations, the endless guilt trips dressed up as love. I thought about the years I had wasted trying to earn approval that was never really love, it was control. They had broken their own futures trying to control mine. And me? I had finally stepped into a future I chose for myself. It wasn't perfect. Some nights were lonelier than others. Some mornings I still woke up half expecting an angry voicemail, or a desperate plea. Healing isn't a straight line, it's a messy, tangled path that sometimes loops back on itself when you least expect it. But every time I doubted, every time the old guilt tried to creep back in, I reminded myself, I didn't cause their downfall. I just stopped cushioning it. They broke the bank. I broke free. Freedom, it turned out, wasn't a lightning bolt. It was 1,000 small choices, 1,000 tiny moments of choosing myself over the roles they had assigned me. It was saying no, and surviving the silence that followed. It was building something from the wreckage they left behind, and realizing I liked what I was building better anyway. A few months later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that my parents had moved into a much smaller rental home on the outskirts of town. My brother had picked up a series of odd jobs, none of which lasted long. They were living the consequences of 1,000 choices they had made long before I ever said no. I sent no messages. I made no visits. Some doors, once built, are not meant to be reopened. And I was too busy walking through the new ones. One crisp autumn evening, a year to the day since I had first walked out of that suffocating house, I threw a small party at my apartment. Just a few close friends, some takeout, a bottle of cheap champagne. Nothing fancy, but it was a celebration all the same. As we toasted, laughing over stupid jokes and plans for the future, I felt a warmth I hadn't realized I was missing, the warmth of being loved for who I was, not what I could provide. I looked around the room and thought, this is my family now. The family you build, the one that chooses you back without conditions, is stronger than the one you are born into. And in that moment, sipping champagne from a mismatched cup in a too small living room filled with too loud laughter, I knew. They had broken the bank. But I had built something better. I had built a life. I had built freedom. And no one, no guilt trip, no angry voicemail, no family obligation, could take it from me again. Not ever. If there's one thing I've learned from everything that happened, it's that love without respect isn't love at all. It's control, dressed up in guilt and obligation. For most of my life, I believed that loyalty meant surrender, that sacrifice was proof of caring, that saying yes, even when it crushed me, was the only way to belong. I thought that being good meant being useful, and that being useful meant never saying no. It took years, heartbreak, and a mountain of betrayal to realize how wrong that was. Real love doesn't come with a ledger. It doesn't keep score or weigh your worth against what you can provide. It doesn't demand your future as payment for your past. It doesn't punish you for choosing your own well-being. Real love, whether from family, friends, or partners, offers freedom, not chains. The hardest part of this journey wasn't saying no, it was surviving the silence that followed. It was facing the echo of their absence, and not mistaking it for failure. It was sitting alone in my apartment, feeling the temptation to reach out, to apologize just to fill the void, and choosing not to. Healing meant learning that peace can feel uncomfortable at first if you've spent your whole life in chaos. It meant recognizing that just because someone claims to love you doesn't mean they know how. It meant accepting that protecting myself was not selfish, it was necessary. I learned that boundaries are not walls to keep people out, they are doors that let the right people in. And sometimes, the hardest but most vital choice you can make is to close the door on those who refuse to respect you, even if they share your blood. Another thing I learned is that financial freedom is emotional freedom. Money, when weaponized by people you love, becomes a tool of control, of manipulation. They used my sense of responsibility against me for years, making me believe that love meant debt, that caring meant sacrifice without end. Reclaiming my financial independence was more than just fixing my credit, it was reclaiming my autonomy, my right to live a life that wasn't dictated by their poor choices. There's a quiet power in saying no more. It doesn't always come with fireworks or applause. Sometimes it comes with slammed doors, bitter words, and lonely nights. But with time, it also brings peace, dignity, and the space to build something better. The truth is, not everyone will celebrate your growth. Some people will see your boundaries as betrayal. Some will accuse you of abandoning them simply because you refuse to abandon yourself anymore. Let them. Their reactions are not your responsibility. You do not owe your life to people who only see you as a resource. You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are allowed to outgrow the roles they force you into. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to walk away. And when you do, when you finally choose yourself, you'll realize that the family you build around self-respect, honesty, and mutual support is worth infinitely more than the family you were born into but who chose not to honor you. Freedom isn't just a place or a status, it's a mindset. It's waking up every day knowing you are the author of your story, not a side character in someone else's drama. It's recognizing that you have worth beyond what you can provide. It's refusing to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Looking back, I don't regret saying no. I don't regret walking away. If anything, I regret not doing it sooner. Because the life I have now, imperfect, growing, entirely mine, is a life built on choice, not obligation. And that, more than anything, is the lesson I hope anyone who reads this will take away. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not cruel for demanding respect. You are not wrong for wanting to live a life free from manipulation and guilt. You are allowed to break the cycle. You are allowed to build a door. You are allowed to walk through it, and never look back.